Hello, this is Randall. Thanks for tuning in. The following recording is of a meeting recently in Second Life. Second Life is a virtual world where we meet once a week to talk about the truth of what we are. You can find out more about this virtual world at secondlife.com. You can read more or find out about the next meeting at avastuzero.blogspot.com. Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming out. Hope everyone's doing fine tonight. So we have these meetings each Tuesday, and the format of the meeting is fairly informal. Have some initial talks about what is Advaita, Vedanta, and what is it that we're talking about. And then we'll follow that with any questions or comments. We've been known to devolve into dancing, but we'll see what happens. So Advaita is a non-dual tradition of Hinduism, and in its philosophy it is similar to Zen, which is Buddhism, Sufism, which is of the Islam religion, Taoism, the Kabbalah is also a non-dual wisdom. Advaita can be translated as not two. And what does that really mean? Not two. It's really about the spiritual search. Somewhere along the way we've suffered, had problems. We've been taught about God or whatever religion we come from. So we have a framework of beliefs that we learned. And we see the world through this framework, through our beliefs. So if I look in front of me, I see a table. And that table is over there. The table is outside of me. The table is separate of me. And I am a person residing in a body. I have thoughts, and those thoughts make me suffer. Or something happens out there that I don't like. Something happens that's bad, and I suffer. And so this is the situation that we're in. And we come to the spiritual search looking for a way out. We hear about enlightenment. We hear about ending suffering. We hear about bliss, wonderful experiences, permanent happiness. This is similar to the framework of beliefs that we started with. Yet it's very promising. It promises the end of suffering. And that's really what we want. So Advaita Vedanta means not to. So in this meeting, we will talk about what does this really mean? What is the reality? What really am I? What really are you? And if we come to this because we're at the end of our rope, we've had enough of this suffering, we're determined, we're earnest, in that openness, we're willing to set down our beliefs for just a little while. To set down this compulsion to project this image of ourself, this ego, and simply rest for a moment. And in this openness, Advaita teaches that all beliefs are founded in illusion. Advaita points to direct experience, not beliefs. In the end, Advaita negates itself. In the end, even Advaita must be discarded, because it is also only a concept. So if you find yourself with this earnestness, with this desire to really see through this self that you take yourself to be, to really see through the suffering, then it's easy. The only thing standing in the way is the false. Because once all beliefs are set aside, the only thing we have left is direct experience. Whatever is happening. We don't have to call it anything. We don't have to have labels. We don't need the word table to know this thing in front of us. So that direct experience is what I'm pointing to. And we can't have this direct experience in the past. We can't have this direct experience in 5 minutes or 5 seconds. We can only have this direct experience in this very instant. And that's what I'm pointing to. This very instant. And what's happening in this very instant? In this very instant, we have the sound of a voice. We have the sound of the waves, the glare of the computer screen, the feeling of the body pressing in the chair or the couch, the feeling of the clothes on the body, maybe the grumbling of the tummy. We have a direct experience of thoughts. Whatever those thoughts might be. And that's what we're pointing to. Whatever is in direct experience right now. It doesn't matter what it is. We can talk about enlightenment. We can talk about suffering. We can talk about anything. Whatever we talk about, we're using concepts and words. And those are always relative. If I say it's good, you can say it's bad. Everything is relative. So it doesn't matter what the content of it is. It's simply noticing this direct experience. Notice that that's happening. Notice that things are happening in direct experience right now. And notice that that's the only time that they can ever happen. Because if we have a thought about the past, we're not going into the past. We're simply having a thought right now in direct experience about the past. That's the content of that thought. If we have imagination or anxiety, that thought doesn't happen in the future. That thought happens right now in direct experience. Doesn't matter what the content of that thought is. Simply notice that that thought is happening in direct experience right now. The only place it can ever happen. So we notice that the thought talks about me constantly. I want this. I am this. I have this. I want that. I'm afraid of that. I don't like that. These are all happening, and that me is what the thoughts are talking about. But that's also known in direct experience right now, whatever the thoughts are. So if we really look closely at this instant, at this moment, and we don't rely on all the concepts, the beliefs, or the words, and we just set those aside for a second. We don't worry about the content of the thought. We just notice that it's happening. So if we set all of that aside for just a second, and just notice that all of this is happening, the only place it can ever happen, right in this instant. And there's a knowing of that happening. The thing is known. The thought is known. The body in the chair is known. The glare of the screen is known. So we don't need any concept or word to know this. We know that already. We don't have to describe that. That's a common experience. That's what's happening. Every one of us can agree. No one can argue that fact. That's what's happening. And I don't have to describe that to you. I don't have to have a word or a concept about it. You just know that that's what's happening. These things, whatever they are happening in this immediate moment. And there's a knowing of them or an awareness of them. That's obvious. That's effortless. That didn't take any effort to get to. That's always there. And this knowing of the thing itself is not part of the appearance. The knowing of the appearance does not appear in that field of what's happening. The knowing is what the happening happens against, or on, or in. There's an awareness of these things that are happening in the immediacy of this moment. There's an awareness there. Like a mirror that's reflecting all of these. So the thought comes, or the sensation of the body, or the glare of the screen. And all those things register in this mirror. They reflect. And that mirror of awareness does not hold on to those. That mirror of awareness does not call that thing good and that thing bad. That mirror of awareness does not change if something happens, something that's reflected. If suffering is happening in thoughts, that mirror of awareness does not suffer. So simply notice that that's going on. And that doesn't require a concept to know, or a belief. We don't have to read any scriptures to know this. We don't have to go to a teacher to learn this. This is our innate nature. We already know this. This is already happening. We call it awareness, and we assign that awareness to this body, to this mind. Yet, when we lay aside these concepts of body, mind, and we just look at what can we really say, what can we really say that we know is going on? There's an awareness of these things happening in the immediacy of this moment. And that's it. That's all we can really say with any truthfulness. Because the minute that I go into thought and I say that's a chair, then I go into concept immediately. Because that's not a chair, that's not a table. Those words don't really mean anything. There's something registering. I can't even say it's round, because round really doesn't mean anything. We can agree that it's round. We agree on the word. But the word round doesn't mean anything. So we notice that whatever this is registering, reflecting in this mirror of awareness. Simply notice that that's happening. The sound of the waves. They're instantaneously and effortlessly reflected, registered. They're known to happen. You can hear them. And that, whatever that is registering, reflecting. So stay in that for a moment. Notice this witnessing, this presence of witnessing, or this witnessing presence. Because we could say that it's almost a presence. We can't see it because it's what's doing the seeing. It's not an object, or it would happen in this, it would be reflected by this witnessing. And this witnessing is almost palpable. It's almost a presence. And it's usually missed because we're following thought into the past and following thought into the future and going on about our life. But it's always there. It's always that which is seeing what's going on. That presence is always there. In the background. So we must go into thought. We must look at thought to talk about me, to talk about the person, to talk about the body-mind, to make the relation of identification with that body-mind. So we've already gone into concepts to do that. And we didn't need to do that. We had to learn the word person. We had to learn the word body-mind. We had to learn that identification with the body-mind. Yet that witnessing presence, that presence of awareness, is there always and before that identification with the body-mind. It's always there. It's prior to that. So if we're involved in painting or writing or anything, watching a sunset, sometimes that identification with the body-mind is not there. And definitely when we go to sleep at night, that identification is not there. But notice that witnessing presence has to be there before you can even know that sunrise. So even when that sense of me is gone, the sunrise is still happening, is still reflecting in that mirror. So we're talking about this clear, empty, naked, non-conceptual knowing, witnessing that's happening. That's always there. So rest in that for a moment. Feel that. Notice that. Notice that the body, the sensation of the body, is known in that. That's how you know the sensation of the body. Notice that the thoughts that are coming are known to arise. The thoughts come and the thoughts go. But something knows those thoughts. Those are reflected in that mirror, seen in that witnessing. This requires no concept at all. Requires no belief. It's not about religion or spirituality. It's simply your true nature. It's what we mean when we say, I am. It's really what we're meaning. That sense of existence, that presence. But we notice that that presence never suffers. It witnesses the suffering. It witnesses happiness. It witnesses all these states that come and go. But that presence is not a state. It's seeing the states come and go. It's seeing happiness come and go. It's seeing suffering or sadness come and go. It notices that they're temporary. It itself is not temporary. It's always there, the basis for anything that can happen. So that presence, we look at that. We simply notice that it's always there. It's always been there, but we miss it. We miss it because we're preoccupied with the mind and with what's going on and the drama and the stories. We're preoccupied with all that. The content. We're preoccupied with the content. But the context is always watching. That never changes. That is formless. Yet notice that that presence, we can't see it because it's doing the seeing. It's doing the witnessing. All the senses, all the input from the senses register on that. The touch, the taste, the smell, the hearing, the seeing with the eyes. All that stuff is known to happen in this witnessing. So it's not a function of the eyes. It's not a function of the ears or the smell, the touch. Those all happen in this presence of witnessing. So we can't see it. It's formless. But we can't find it because we are it. We can't find a center of it. We can't find a boundary for this presence. What our true nature is, our essence, that what we say, that what we mean when we say I am, that presence, that simple feeling of witnessing presence. We can't find a boundary for that. We can't find a center for that. It seems to go on and on forever. Vast, open like the sky. So, Advaita, as I said in the beginning, can be translated as not to. Not to. We know that witnessing presence is there. We don't have to have a name for it or a concept for it. We don't have to believe it because we are it already. We just simply notice that it's there. Notice that we generally miss it. But notice that even when we miss it, it's still there, or else we wouldn't know what was going on. We wouldn't know what we were involved in, because that witnessing is what knows the thoughts that we're lost in. So, not to. How do we get to not to from that? Because that's witnessing of the things. That's two things. That's at least two things, right? Witnessing of the thing, witnessing of the thought, witnessing of the body, witnessing of the world. But when we notice that this witnessing is boundless, infinite, vast like the open sky, we notice that the things that happen, the thoughts, the body, we notice that those things have the same feeling as this presence. We can't say that that body is a different feeling than the presence, because that presence itself is that feeling. That's that presence. That's what that feels like. That body, we only know that because we know that presence. We only know the thought because we know that presence already. The thought is the presence. The body is the presence. That chair, that table is the presence. It's the same feeling. There's no place where presence stops and the chair starts. There's no place where the body starts and the presence stops. There's no outside to this presence. It's all in the presence. It's all the presence itself. So if the thoughts arise, they're happening to the presence. But if it's all one or not two, then can we say that it's really happening? So we simply notice that presence of witnessing. can't be separated from that which is being witnessed. Those waves rise and fall in this witnessing. We look up at the moon, and the moon happens in this witnessing. I can't separate the witnessing presence from the moon, from the sun. Not to. Oneness. What are all these words meaning? So, maybe we go down a path towards meditation. So we sit. Our proper posture and our object of meditation, or simply watching the breath. And we're sitting there, doing our meditation with an expectation that we're going to see something, or get something, or with just an expectation that we're going to sit there for longer than 2 minutes without being distracted. And then we feel like we failed at it, and then maybe we come back and try again, and maybe we do this for years. Yet, the entire time that we're sitting there, looking for something, watching for a state to arise, or trying to calm the mind down, the entire time that presence is already there. Watching those thoughts that are being disturbed, or watching that leg that's going to sleep, watching the impatience, or the irritation, or the anxiety, watching the expectation for some kind of a special spiritual state to come. Watching the body moving around, doing its job, spending time with its family, driving the car. All these relative things, these appearances, they can't arise, they can't happen unless something knows them. And you are knowing them to happen. That presence is always there. And then we have thoughts about confusion. Well, I'm not sure I understand. But it doesn't make any difference if the mind understands. The mind can never understand. That's a paradox to the mind. Yet all the while that presence is there witnessing the mind. Already beyond the mind. Necessary for the mind to even happen. Necessary for those thoughts to even happen. Because mind is a word that we use as a conceptual box. And in that box we put thoughts and memories and anticipation and imagination and all these things. We put it in that box we call mind. But we see that mind is just a word. It doesn't mean anything really. We just use it as a box to put stuff in, put thoughts in, and all this stuff that seems to happen. But the very fact that we know that it happens at all is evidence that that presence is there already. So, one of the most brilliant teachings of Advaita is be as you are. Be as you are. And maybe now you understand a little more why that's a very profound teaching. Because you can't be anything other than be what you are. That presence that you are is already there, always. And that presence can never suffer. It watches the suffering. And that suffering is always relative. It's always dependent on the idea of a me. Yet we see that that me That idea of me, that body-mind, that happens in that presence that we can't deny. That's prior to that, always there and watching. Be as you are. Just be. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Is there anyone here that doesn't see what I'm pointing to? Hello again, my friend. How are you? Thank you for the question, Chantilly. Guess it's not really a question, is it? So you say you grasp the concepts intellectually, and that it's frustrating to not be able to identify with the knowing. So there are thoughts going on. Trying to grasp what's being said. And then more thoughts come. I can't understand. I'm not understanding. I'm not getting it. I want to identify with the knowing. So all of that, how is that happening? How are you knowing that? How are you knowing all that you just said? Yes. And that cognition is immediate. That cognition is effortless. And if we look closely, that cognition is almost like a presence. And that cognition is non-conceptual. And then we have thoughts come in, and thoughts are conceptual. That's all they are. The concept of an I, concept of grasping intellectually, the concept of frustration, the concept of identification. These are all concepts arising in this non-conceptual cognizing. So that presence is already there. So we talk about identification with the knowing. Then we have to invent this idea of a me who can identify. And that comes in thought too. That comes in concept too. Yet that cognition is always there. That pure, naked cognition is always there. That's what all this happens in. That's what all the concepts happens in. So that cognition is always there. It's never turned off. Even if you stop thinking for a moment, that cognition is still shining. That presence is still there. That if you have thoughts, there's witnessing of thoughts. If you have no thoughts going on, there's a witnessing of no thoughts. There's a witnessing still going on of what's being heard, what's being seen, what's being smelled, what's being felt. That cognition is still going on, even when the thinking is not. But we equate the thinking with the cognition. We think that the thoughts are seeing. The thoughts are the source of the cognition. We're simply pointing to the fact that the thoughts happen to that cognition that's already there, whether the thoughts are there or not. Thank you for your comment, Elia. I like what you said there. There is the image and witnessing this image. So really, that's all we really know, isn't it? That's really all we really have, that we don't need a belief or a concept. Talk about God or we talk about cheeseburgers, we don't really know what we're talking about. It's all meaningless. It's all just words. The words themselves have no meaning. The things that we're talking about have no absolute existence unless they're known, unless they reflect in this witnessing presence. So if we boil it all down and set down our concepts for a moment, our beliefs for a moment, then all we really can say is that, just as Elia just said, this image is happening in the witnessing. No one can argue with that. Is this an expansive process? What do you mean by that, Denzo? I'm sorry, Devin. What do you mean by that? An opening and widening of perceptions. So that's a very good question. So what are perceptions? Perceptions are what we know through the senses. So we're seeing a computer screen. Many other things are happening in this vision of seeing, this perception. We're feeling, maybe we're feeling the arms on the desk or the back against the couch, or maybe we're feeling the grumbling of the tummy. Maybe we're smelling. These are all perceptions. So we talk about opening and widening perceptions. We have to know what we're talking about. We have to know what perceptions really mean. So anything that can come through the senses is a perception. So to say opening and widening of perceptions really is a concept. We don't really know what that means. We don't know what Advaita is. Discarding all of the concepts that we've been taught, things that we've heard, and just looking at the only thing that we can really say for sure, the only thing that we can't disagree on, and that is the fact of this being. That being is happening. That's the only thing we really can say for sure. But we don't need beliefs. There are many ways that we can look at perceptions. And we can talk about what do they really mean, what are they. And sometimes that seems necessary because we get stuck on those things. We get stuck on it. Well, I'm seeing through my eyes. Well, that's obvious. Well, is it? Is it really obvious? I mean, go look at a book on brain research. Try to find out the truth, because that's really the only thing we care about. We don't care about these beliefs or concepts of enlightenment or whatever these spiritual concepts are. We don't really care about any of that. We just don't want to suffer anymore. So the only way we can disprove a belief is to investigate it. So investigate it. If there is a belief there, what is it? And let's look at it. So go get a book on brain research and see what perceptions really are. Go get a book on how the senses actually work. We see that the eyes are not windows. The eyes are not open holes that someone on the inside of the head is looking out into the outside world. The eyes are not clear panes of glass that we can see through. They're lenses. They catch the light. And that reflection in light is passed through as data across nerves to the brain. So what we're seeing is not really what's there. And you can talk to any brain scientist or neuroscientist and confirm that for yourself. So what we're seeing is not really what's there. So our perceptions lie to us. So this is probably what you're talking about when you say opening and widening of perceptions. And in Advaita we would say seeing through the perceptions as illusion. Eliminating the unreal, the reality survives. Yes. Yes, Elizabeth. Okay, so more awareness of self to the core. Well, we start talking about more awareness, and then it's something that then it becomes a goal. We need more awareness. We simply need to notice that awareness is present. Awareness can't be added to. Awareness is it. So, to talk about more awareness of self to the core of being is adding several layers of duality where none exist. Simply notice that presence of witnessing, that presence of awareness. See beyond the adjuncts of body-mind complex to what resides in the heart, the self. Okay, I'm not really sure I know what that means, Kurt. All things come down to a particle reaction of electrical impulses that never end. That's very conceptual, Diva. Just invite you to investigate that statement that you made and see if any of it's necessary. See if any of it can be found unless we use concepts or words. Not quite, but I'm finding a difficulty properly expressing. Sure, I understand. But the beauty is that we don't need to express it. We already know it. It's already there. What we're seeking, we already are. We already are that. He's speaking about the atom. I see. So how do we know the idea of an atom? Where does that concept of an atom appear? So that presence has to be there for the idea of an atom to even happen. If that presence wasn't there, you wouldn't know anything about atoms. You wouldn't know anything about anything. The world itself wouldn't appear. So we can talk about the atom and the relative appearance of the world and how does the world work and all that, but we've done that. That's not got us anywhere. Hello, Jason. I didn't see you over there, but this room is very laggy, and I can't move my screen around, so I didn't see you sitting over there.
Don't worry about it. I was just trying to hide from you, that's all.
I'm trying to, I guess, quantify the concept to fit it into my mind to begin to properly process this. Well, that's what we've always done, Devin, and that's got us nowhere. So Advaita is the invitation to see that the mind can never figure it out. This is death to the mind. The mind doesn't want to know awareness because it's nothing. It's death. The mind is afraid of death. The answer will never be found in the mind. So if you try to strip it out, break it up, analyze it, you're wasting your time. Simply stop the analysis and look at what is knowing the thoughts of analysis. So the question was, I find it's a struggle for me to stop thinking. If I then try to observe, the thoughts still come. So why do you want to stop thoughts? Did I say anything about needing to stop thoughts? So, what's knowing the thoughts? Aren't you already experiencing that? Isn't that always already there? How else would you know the thoughts? So, this knowing is not an experience. This knowing is knowing the thoughts that are trying to stop thinking, trying to get out of this cycle. So in order for the thoughts to even be known, that knowing has to be there. So it's not something that we see, oh, there it is, there's knowing. Because that would happen in knowing. The knowing is what's looking. The knowing is what's seeing the thoughts. So, to experience knowing is to have a thought. To experience knowing is to see this computer screen. To experience knowing is to hear this voice. To experience knowing is the feeling of that body. That's the knowing. You're already experiencing knowing. The whole entire time, the struggle to stop thinking is going on. That's the knowing. It's already happening. It's not something that you have to find. It's inescapable. Why? The one who'd want to stop thoughts is another thought. So we go in circles forever. We just become aware that that knowing is always there. And that knowing is not changed by that which is witnessed. So if suffering is happening in thought, that's the knowing. It's there. Knowing has to be there for that suffering to even happen. But that knowing doesn't suffer. Only the thoughts are of suffering. Even the me who suffers is another thought. That body-mind that we take ourselves to be can only be known because that knowing is already there prior to that. That's a very good question. Sometimes to be free of something, we must see it for what it really is. And as I was talking about before, sometimes in the search, we really get to the point where we've had it with all these spiritual concepts and all this philosophy and psychology and religion. We've had it. We've read it all. We know it all. So we really want to investigate the nature of reality. What is it? And so maybe we pick up a book on brain research because that seems to be where all this is happening. And we look at thoughts. What are thoughts? Fantastic question. And if we read about what thoughts are, we find that thoughts are neurons in the brain that are firing. Hundreds and thousands and millions of neurons firing to create one thought. To create the thought of, here I am. That's millions and millions of neurons firing in complex patterns just to create that. So, are you controlling those neurons? Are you telling all those neurons when to fire? How many times to fire? Do you have like a joystick and you're like in a little video game inside the head and you're pushing all the buttons and trying to make all the neurons fire just to create a thought? Are you doing that? Or is that just happening? Is that a function of the body? Is that a function of the body that's happening without your involvement? And don't take my word for it. Look. Go get the books. Read about it. Watch thought. See if you can control your thought. See if you have any control over what those are. See if you ever had any control over them. You are not the thinker, but don't take my word for it. Find out. Investigate. That's not a dumb question. That's an excellent question. Who is the thinker? So we must have a who. So more thoughts come up. Well, then who's doing it? So this really comes to the core of non-duality, because if there is a who doing it, then that's more than one, right? That's more than, there's a me thinking, and then there's a world, and that's our predicament. That's our suffering. That separation itself is that suffering. So look at that me. Look at that belief that I am a person, that I live in this body-mind, that I am a soul, or I'm a whatever the belief is. Just look at it. Be open to questioning that belief. That's all that's necessary. And look at this. When does that knowledge of me happen? How do you know that you're a me? How do you know that you're a person? How do you know that you live in that body-mind? How do you know that? Investigate it. Don't take my word for it. Investigate it. If we investigate it, we might see that the me is a concept. The me is something that's been given, something that's been taught, something that's been indoctrinated. that there's a person, and that person is that body-mind, and that body-mind is separate from the world, and that's our belief. But as I said in the beginning, Advaita is an invitation to lay down your beliefs for a moment and simply be willing to question them. And we may find that there never was a me, that was only a belief, that's only an idea happening in thought, which is what a belief is. And see if you can find a me outside of that thought, outside of that belief. See if you can maybe open up the brain and look. See if there's a little person inside that brain, behind the eyes with a joystick controlling all of this. See if that person, what does that person live? Does that person live in the chest, or maybe it lives in the knee? Or, I mean, it's really funny once that belief is seen as false, how that belief manifests itself. But it's simply a belief. It's false. The person is a fiction. There's no such thing. But don't take my word for that, because you can never take someone's word for that. That's the core belief. That's the core assumption. You've got to investigate that. You've got to look at that. And you can either be open to that and investigate it, or you can continue identifying with the body-mind, believing you're a person, and go on and suffer. Because that's perfectly okay too. Because that always happens against that background of knowing, which is obvious. So it really doesn't make any difference. You already are that. You already are what you seek. Okay, so if the body is not consciously the thinker, then everything we do is a reaction to a bioelectrical response. Well, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Everything that happens is a reaction. The body is in the job of protecting itself, and its conditioning and its programming, and it takes care of itself. And the thoughts are simply part of that process. There is no one thinking thoughts. The thoughts, there's no way you could control a thought. There's no way you can make a thought. It's simply neurochemicals, neurotoxins firing millions and millions and millions and millions and millions. There's no way you can control that. I can't even drive a car and eat a sandwich at the same time. There is no thinker. There is the awareness of the thought and awarenesses. I love you, Eli. You're brilliant. The thought of the thinker is the thought itself. You could profit it because the image of yourself is always changing all the time. There you go. Brilliant. Well, I think you got the idea, Chantilly. The only thing to do is watch and see if that's actually what's happening. Otherwise, it would just be another belief. And that has absolutely no value. When you see it for yourself, then you're through with it. Once you see a belief is false, then you're done with it. Just like the Maharaj. We're driving the car and we see water in the road. And we start to slow down because we don't want to get our car stuck. Yet we pull up to it slowly and we don't see any water. And we were not sure what the hell happened because there was just water there. And we look at it, and maybe we figure it out, or maybe we ask somebody else. Oh, that's the sun reflecting against the hot pavement, and at an angle it looks like water. Oh, that's bullshit. There's just no way that could happen. I don't believe that. Well, go look. So you drive that, and you drive it, and you drive it, and each time you see that at a certain point, the water disappears. And then you sit there for a while, and you watch the sun go down, and you see that that water disappears with the sun. And you realize that's really an illusion. That water in the road is an illusion. It looks like water. It sure looks like it, but it's not really water. So if we have thirst, we don't go stand in the road and try to drink, because we've seen through that belief. Even though it still looks like water, we don't trust it anymore. We don't believe it. We see it, we instantly know that it's false. So that me, I'm having a conversation, I'm talking. But that's a convention of language. That doesn't mean that there's really a me here. It doesn't mean that there's a person in that body mind. Just because I'm having a conversation, just because I have the words I am, that doesn't mean anything. When we look for that person that we've taken ourselves to be, and we can't find it, we can find no self-center, and we realize that it's false. And really, we really kind of see how ludicrous the whole thing kind of always was. We've always just been told that. Okay, and what of the ones around you? Are they there? Is that car there, the water, the sandwich, and I here to you? Well, these are all appearances, Devin. They appear in this knowing, going back to the beginning. So I can call it another person, I can call it a car, or a water, a sandwich. But that has absolutely no meaning. What does have meaning? What doesn't require a concept? What doesn't require these words that are always relative? And that's seeing that these things can only happen in the immediacy of this very moment. So can't happen 5 minutes from now, can't happen 5 minutes in the past. I can only have that perception, that experience right now. And right now, there's a knowing of that. So I don't need cars and waters and sandwiches. I just need to see that this world, including this body mind, is an appearance on this knowing, in this witnessing, reflecting in this mirror. That presence is there. So we can go into the mind and forever analyze it. And you can trust me that you'll never find the answer, or you can spend forever analyzing it. The answer will never be found in the mind. No amount of analysis in the mind will ever find the answer, because the mind appears in this. The mind appears to the knowing. If your perceptions be considered false at the core, without value do they exist? I'm not sure what that means, Devin. Time is a measure of passage through space. Well, that's fantastic. I'm glad you think that. As I said, Advaita is an invitation to lay down our beliefs. All beliefs. Time and space is a belief, isn't it? So we even lay down even for just a moment, the idea of time and space, the idea of the person, the idea of separation. And we simply look, we simply rest in this non-conceptual witnessing awareness. Simply notice that that's there. It cannot be any simpler than that. The mind wants it to be something else. The mind wants to analyze it. And that's perfectly fine. This particular mind is very good at that and wasted quite a long time, relatively speaking, trying to figure it out. So I'm right there with you, brother. Or sister, whatever you happen to be. But I'm telling you that the mind will never find the answer. You already are what you're seeking. You simply have to notice. Yet, even if you don't notice, that's fine too, because you can't have a confusion thought without that witnessing awareness even being there. And these meetings will get very boring after 2 or 3, because we'll say the same thing over and over and over again. And either we stop and notice, or we don't. It doesn't make any difference, because that presence is already there anyway. The ego equates truth with thought. Yes, absolutely. Thought doesn't take into account the limitations of thought through the human ego. The claim is that their thought means they're in sole possession of the truth. Non-duality has no pride. Thought is completely eliminated. So thanks for coming, everyone. You're free to stay here and chat. I'm going to log off, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Randall.